You are good, you are kind. I have never seen your kind. I am devoted to your praise and forever to your name. Okay. Okay, so I'm getting on here earlier today because I had dinner planned for 6, and then my homegirl texted me saying, we do it earlier? Um, so I'm gonna read for about 40 minutes. I'm gonna read until about 5:10 today, which I normally start at 5. So I'm gonna start reading at 5:10 today. I'm gonna stop reading at 5:10 today. Um, but yeah, we're gonna get us a good, decent, amount of reading it. So yeah, where are we? We're finishing in Maya. So now we're in Esther. Okay? Leviticus, Ezra, with a number. Joshua, Judges, Ruth. 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and King, 1st and Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. There we go. That's where we're at. So, woo, it is cold in my house. And so we're going to pray real quick, and then we're going to get into it. So, Lord, thank you for another day. Thank you for your mercies. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for keeping us. Thank you for your forgiveness, Lord. Lord, please bless my house. I don't know what's going on with the heat in my house, but it is freezing cold in this house. And I got people up in here and I want them to be comfortable. I want to be comfortable. It is freezing, God. So, Lord, I just pray that you just do a work in my furnace. Have it start blowing hot air because it is cold in this house. Okay? In your name I pray, amen. All right, so chapter 1 of Esther. King Ahasuerus, sounds like a dinosaur, holds a feast. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, in the days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan. Okay. The citadel, that is in the 3rd year of his reign, that he made a feast for all of his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of all his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan, the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple on silver rods and marble pillars. And the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement, on alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in the golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king, in accordance with the law. Drinking was not compulsory, for the king had ordered all the officers of his house, which they should do according to each man's pleasure. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. Vashti refuses to parade her beauty. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbana, Bigtha, Abagatha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of the king Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs, I think. Eunuchs? I can't remember. I don't know. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. When the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for it was the king's manner towards all who knew the law, justice, and those closest to him, being Karshana, Shether, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom, what shall we do with the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs. Vashti is disposed by royal decree, and Memucan answered before the king and the princess. Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise her husband in their eyes. When they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought to him, but she did not come. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard this behavior of the queen. Thus, there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and Medes, so that it not be altered, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who was better than she. When the king's decree which he made was proclaimed all through his empire, for it is great, all the wives with honor their husband, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in his own script, and to everyone in their own language, that each man should be master in his house and speak the language of his own people. Chapter 2. Esther prepares to meet the king. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, let the beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful virgins to Shushan, the citadel, and to the women's quarters under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, custodian over the women. And let the beauty preparations be given them. Then let the young woman who please the king be queen instead of Vashti. This thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan the citadel, there were certain Jews whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured in Jeconiah, the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadash, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was, when the king's command and decree were heard, when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel under the custody of Hegai, that Esther was also taken into the king's palace, into the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the woman. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai placed in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. This is favor. She had more preparations than the other women. She had the best place to be in the palace than the other women. Ahasuerus makes Esther his queen. Each young woman's turn came into the king's Ahasuerus after she completed the 12 months preparation, according to the regulations for the women, and thus the days of their preparations appointed: 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with perfume and preparation for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the woman, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go into the king unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter to go into the king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the woman, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10 months, which in the month of Tobeth, the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of the king. Mordecai reveals a conspiracy. When the virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gates. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gates, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Chapter 3. Haman is promoted. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advised him and set him his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, Why do you transgress the king's command? Now it happened when they spoke to him daily and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay homage, Haman was filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. Haman is permitted to destroy the Jews. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, which is lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Destroy the Jews and murder one day. Okay. To determine the month. This is to destroy the people of Mordecai. Okay. They were trying to determine when they were going to destroy the people of Mordecai, which was the Jews. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different than the other people's, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for a king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it to the king's treasuries. So he's going to pay to destroy these people. Okay. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, The money and the people are given to you to do with them what seems good to you. What type of king is that? Well, a decree of mass execution is sent. This is crazy. And the king's scribes were called into the 13th day of the first month, and the decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials over all the people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. There we go. In the name of Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed into the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. Subjoined into text. Okay. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all the people, as they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Chapter 14. Mordecai mourns and Esther hears of it. When Mordecai learned all that happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. He cried with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gates, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king commanded that a decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and in ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. And she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had appointed to attend to her, and she gave him command concerning Mordecai to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. And he also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he may show to Esther and explain it to her, that he might command her to go into the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther of the words of Mordecai. Esther agrees to speak to the king. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command from Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's province know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, he has but one law, will put all to death, except for the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther. Do not think in your heart that you will escape the king's palace any more than the other Jews, for if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you will come into the kingdom for such a time as this? Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Who knows if, oh, I'm sorry, are you still on here? You said verse. We are in Esther, chapter 4, 14. Who knows? I'm about to underline that. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time like things that happen to you. Okay. What he's saying is, it's not a coincidence. No problem. It's not a coincidence that you've been blessed with the power and the position that you're in at a time like this. There's no way that it's a coincidence that you've been blessed as queen when your people are all about to be annihilated. That's wild. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So she already has favor, but she's like, look, we're going to fast. We're going to strengthen our spirit. So then when I go in here, even though I haven't even been called into the king's place, I'm going in there off of spirit alone, off of the Holy Spirit. Okay? So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Okay? Chapter 5, the king grants audience to Esther. Now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. All right, so she's not going to get killed because he held up the scepter. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter, and the king said to her, what do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom. Okay? Hold on, let's just backtrack real quick. What her uncle said, very much so true. If you are in a situation to help people and you don't, for if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. So that's faith that he's speaking off of. This is faith right here. He has faith. There's going to be some type of relief from somewhere. It might not be from here, but it's going to be from somewhere. But you and your father's house, y'all are cooked. That's what he's saying. But he had faith that it was going to come from somewhere. Okay? Anyway, so Esther answered, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Excuse me. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done. Then Esther answered and said, my petition and request is this. If I found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king said. Haman prepares a gallows for Mordecai. So Haman went out that day joyful with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. So he's mad because he's not trembling and scared. Okay. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. His hatred is so wow. His hatred is so deep for Mordecai, he can't even truly appreciate the power and placement that he has with the king. Goofy. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And this thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. Just hateful. Okay. Chapter 6. The king decides to honor Mordecai. That night the king could not sleep. So no one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Okay. And the king's servant who attended him, saying, nothing has been done for him. So the king said, who was in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said to him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, what shall be done for the man who the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? Okay. You see this entitlement? This is going to get him caught up. Entitlement is going to get him caught up. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which a royal crest placed on his head. Then let his robe and horses be delivered on the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him. He's really going crazy. Then parade him on the horseback throughout the city square, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Okay? Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horses you suggest, and do so for Mordecai, the Jew who sits in the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. This is why you got to be careful what you agree to do, and be careful of your words, okay? Careful of your words. You got to understand the situation. He just got to talking and doing too much. He don't even understand it's coming for him. Haman is humiliated. Do you hear me? Humiliated and dejected. So Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Afterwards, Mordecai went back to the city, to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning and with his head covered. So he was joyful when it was time to come to kill him. But now that he did something good, he don't want to joyful. When Haman told his wife Zeresh all that his friends and all that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife said to him, if Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but surely fall before him. If Mordecai, wow, these are the same people that just said what they said about the Gero, right? If Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. I wonder why they said that. Hold on, let's see what chapter 6. This is my other Bible. If you're new here, I have two Bibles in front of me because this is an amplified version, and so sometimes it just explains a little bit better for me. So this is chapter 6, verse 13. Oh, this is Job. Sorry, Esther. Come on now, chapter 6, verse 13. And Haman recounted to Jerus's wife, Master, and everything that happened to him. One of the wise men and Jerus's wife said him, if Mordecai before you have begun to fall, is of the offspring of the Jews, you cannot prevail against him. What should be? So maybe they didn't know. Just by gonna know your history. Maybe they didn't know that he was a Jew before. Mm. But the reason why they probably said that is because they know who the Lord is, and they know that that's Lord over the Jews. Okay. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Chapter 7. Esther intercedes for her people. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine. The king said to Esther, "What is your petition? Queen Esther, it shall be granted to you, and what is your request of to have the kingdom, it shall be done." Then Queen Esther answered and said, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me a petition, my people, my request, for we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy would never compensate for the king's loss. Haman is hanged on his own gallows. Sheesh." So the king Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, "Who is he and where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing?" And Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Then Haman arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went to the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was, and the king said, "Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house?" He's like, "You're really going crazy." As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, "Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman." Then the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows, and he prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. You gotta be careful what you try to destroy other people with. Be careful with what you try to destroy others with. Wow. Chapter 8, Esther pleads again for her people. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears to counteract the evil of Haman, the Agagite, and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther rose and stood before the king and said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen?" Ahasuerus revokes Haman's decree. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on gallows because he tried to lay his hands on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the name of the king, sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke." So they went from a letter being written to kill all of them to being able to rewrite their own letter. They're able to rewrite their own story. Come on now. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the third month, which is a month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps and the governors, and the princes in the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on the royal horses bred from swift steeds. The Jews are permitted to retaliate. Sheesh. But these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people in providence that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Which means, okay. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all the people, that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened, and pressed on the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan, the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. And the Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and city where the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews, because their fear of Jews fell upon them. Okay? So I'm going to stop here. I'm thinking I will come back on here later. That's the hope. Because we still have Esther 9 and 10, and then we got Job 1 through 5. So we still have that left. So I'm hoping to be back home in a couple hours, and then I will go back live again. So yeah, I hope to see y'all. Please come back in a couple hours. I'm going to finish the reading then. Make sure that you follow me so that you know when I go live. I don't know if they have like notifications on TikTok, but if you want a notification, I also go live on YouTube, and the link is in my bio for that. Just so you guys know like when I'm actually going live. Because I don't know if that's how it works on TikTok, because I'm still like trying to figure out TikTok with the whole live thing, because this is my first time like really going live. So with that being said, I'll be back in a couple hours. I hope y'all have a wonderful night. If you don't come back, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Sending love to you guys, and bye.